Today on Dollars and Cents Spare Change, we're going to talk about budgetings, 4 actionable items that you can take with you to start doing your budget, help you become more likely to reach your financial goals. We're going to talk about 50-30-20, zero-based budgeting, paying yourself first, as well as the envelope cash stuffing methods. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Dollars and Cents Spare Change Edition, where we're going to go a little bit deeper into a topic. Today, we're going to be talking some actionable items about budgeting. With me from the HAPO marketing team is Marcelo. You may recognize Marcelo from HAPO's social media. In fact, I believe we just recently posted a video with you talking about the 50-30-20 budget, which we're going to get into a little bit more. Welcome, Marcelo. Tell me, how did you get started in this?
Definitely. Well, thank you for having me, Scott. Honestly, it's an honor. For starters, one of the main things that I wanted to get across before we begin is I started as a teller with HAPO and moved into a financial service specialist position, which is basically a loan officer at HAPO.
Okay.
And during my time on the front lines, I also took it upon myself to take the CCUFC certification course. If you don't know what CCUFC is, it basically stands for Certified Credit Union Financial Counselor.
Okay.
And it's a few month-long course where you basically, read an entire book provided by CUNA, which is a Credit Union National Association, which is one of the largest associations that advocates for credit unions. But take this course, take an exam, and then you are certified, right? And I did that because I felt like when I got to HAPO, I didn't have any previous banking experience. And I quickly realized that there are so many different types of situations that members are in, so many different challenges that they face. And I didn't want to leave our members feeling like they didn't have someone that they could rely on to help them, to essentially teach them, or just to educate them in general about how to overcome these challenges.
And we've talked about the financial coaching on the podcast a number of times before. So this, for everybody out there, is why our financial coaches get into what they do.
I think that one of the biggest things is, for me, is having the ability to take this course and get the certification was not only to help myself, but really at the end of the day to help all our members.
Yeah. And today we're going to expand on that a little bit and help everybody out there listening with budgeting concepts. We're going to cover, I believe, 4 different budgeting concepts today. Before we jump into that, I remember reading somewhere while doing a little bit of research for this that about 55% of Americans don't have any sort of a budget whatsoever. And I believe that somewhere else I was reading that if you are following a detailed budget, you're probably in the range of like 2 times more likely to reach your financial goals if you're doing that. Yeah. So these tools we're going to talk about today are items that people can implement to really help drive towards those goals that they've got going. So give me a rundown right out of the gate. What budgeting tactics are we going to be looking at today?
So the things that we're going to touch on today will be the 50-30-20 budgeting method, the zero-based budgeting method, the pay yourself first budgeting method, which is my personal favorite.
Okay.
And then as well as the cash envelope system.
Okay. I've utilized the cash envelope system previously with a relative when I was helping them out, so I know a little bit about that one. And I've got a pretty good idea about some of the other ones. But let's go ahead and jump in right out of the gate. You said it was your favorite, but it wasn't the first you mentioned. Do you want to start with the $0 or the pay yourself first, or do you want to go to the 50-30-20?
No, we can just run right through them. Yeah, 50-30-20
right.
works for me. It's fresh on my mind as well because we just did the video like you mentioned. So
perfect. All right. So give us a rundown of how this budgeting method works and the type of person that it might be good for.
Yeah. So if you haven't, watched our video on the 50-30-20 budgeting method, which if you're interested at all, it'd be great for you, to go back, check that out.
Go follow our
Instagram.
socials.
But the way it works is essentially 50% of your budget would go towards your needs, 30% of your budget would go towards your wants, and then the remaining 20% would go towards savings, debt, or investment. And with that being said, I feel like this budgeting method works really well for most people because you essentially categorize, the 3 main things that you have to, spend your income on.
Okay.
And so 50% of your budget is going towards needs because that's essentially the biggest amount of expenses that you have for the month. That could look like, paying your rent or mortgage, paying groceries, paying utilities, paying cell phone bill, internet bill, things like that.
Okay.
So, whereas moving into the 30% budgeting rule, moving into the 30% segment is basically for your wants. So really, at the end of the day, that's your fun money.
Okay. Vacations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Fun money, entertainment, hobbies, anything like that. Anything that you're really into. I know a lot of people are into, gaming, like you said, travel, things like that. So after that, we have the 20% segment, which that segment is basically for saving, investing, or debt repayment. So really, at the end of the day, most people might think, am I saving or am I paying debt? And paying off your debt is a form of saving in the long run. So it's kind of all, clustered together. So yeah.
Okay, and that's going to be a little bit backwards from your personal favorite, the pay yourself first, because the last segment you talked about there was savings, and paying yourself first is going to flip that completely backwards.
Right.
Now, obviously, this is, as a concept, going to be one of those things where you still have to make some adjustments on your 50, 30, 20, because if you don't make enough money to cover all of your expenses with that 50%, you probably need to make it maybe a 55% or a 60%, obviously.
Exactly.
But the concept still stands that you can start from what you've got, take a look at how that budgeting works, what those pools of money are going to look like, and then adjust from there. Because again, these are methods; these aren't one size fits all type of a scenario.
Exactly, and you're right. I mean, the thing with budgeting, especially with something like starting off with the 50, 30, 20 budgeting rule, if you've never done it before, you're going to quickly realize it's not, like you said, one size fits all. It's not set in stone either. So the whole point of it is to try it, and if it doesn't work for you, adjust.
Yeah. And then, of course, like if you're in maybe even a better scenario, it could be that your needs are covered by, say, 35%, at which point now you can throw so much more money into your want category and spend time going out to beer festivals or other things, not talking from personal experience. But 100% adjusting those categories for what works for you. But like you said, the main concept, put the money into those three main buckets, and starting with a 50%, 30%, 20% as a guide, and then looking at the actual numbers from there. Yeah, I think that's a pretty solid, simple way that pretty much everybody should be able to take a look at, and as a good starting point. Not overly complex.
Yep, exactly, and you're right. It's a pretty good framework to start with, because you don't have to necessarily track every single dollar, especially for people that think that that's a little too tedious, or they don't have time for it. So. Yeah.
And then there's going to be the person that is that meticulous. They want to track every dollar, every quarter that they pump into a pinball machine. They want to track all of it, and that's where we're going to kind of shift our gear to the zero-based budget, which is literally tracking every dollar and having a plan for each one of them.
Yep.
So we're going from kind of a loose feeling, kind of an easygoing type of a budgeting plan to a much more rigid and meticulous the planner, or maybe some OCD aspect going on. But let's talk about that zero-based budget and what people can do with that one.
Yeah, so the zero-based budgeting method, it really is that. It's taking the income, your net income that you receive, whether that's biweekly or monthly, and assigning every single one of your dollars a purpose. So each one of your dollars has a job, right? So with that being said, by the time the month's over, by the time, ideally it's time for your next pay day, you're down to zero at that point. So
now, and the concept there isn't that you have spent every dollar. It is that every dollar has a purpose.
Exactly.
So some of those dollar bills might have the purpose of going into a savings account or a retirement account. Some of them might be designated for Mike and Ike's because you can't get through a week without having something fun.
Yeah.
But that's still planned for.
Right, exactly.
Now, it doesn't have to be Mike and Ike's. You could switch to hot tamales or something. But again, you've got a plan for each of those dollars. So you know where everything is going. And if you're following that, then you should basically be able to adjust your lifestyle to say, hey, this is where things have been going. Maybe it's a little up or down in one category, but you can adjust from there because you have a plan and you're working on that.
Right, exactly. And you're very right. I mean, that method is not to say, spend all of your money on, things that you may feel like you want or need. It's like you said, it's assigning every single dollar a role. And with that being said, at the end of it, if you ran out of money, if you had, zero, at least you know that what's the word I'm thinking of? You assigned a specific amount to savings, a specific amount to paying back your debt, a specific amount, to investing into, your financial future. So
now I feel like with a budgeting tactic like this one, you're probably reevaluating those numbers pretty regularly.
Yep.
If you're assigning a certain amount of those dollars to, say, gas, and gas prices go up or down over the course of a month or two, obviously you're going to want to reassign some of those dollars, meaning, like with any good budget, you should be reevaluating these, maybe with this one a little bit more often than with other ones.
Right, exactly. And that's the thing, is that I feel like a lot of people that I meet, that I previously met at the branch level, they don't necessarily practice actively looking at your banking account, understanding how much you have, what expenses are coming up, and how much you need to essentially, get by. I feel like a lot of people are very into like money avoidance, where they, actively don't check their account every day. They don't necessarily know at any point, any given point in time, how much they have there. And so that could leave you astray. If you're not actively checking your finances, if you're not actually keeping yourself in check and taking accountability, then of course it's not going to work for you.
Yeah, creating a budget is step one. Following the budget and adjusting the budget, that's step 2 and 3, and you repeat those regularly.
Exactly.
Now, I can admit I'm not the type of person that checks my accounts daily, but I do check my accounts pretty regularly, at least once a week, if not more often than that. Maybe a little bit of money avoidance there, but I'm trying to keep a good eye on the things as I go.
Yeah.
Daily, I think, is going to provide people a much clearer picture of what they're spending, where that money is going on a regular basis, and honestly, probably pretty good for keeping an eye out for any fraudulent charges as well, which completely different topic, but another good reason to be looking into your accounts on a regular basis.
Yep, definitely. See, and I'm the type of person that checks my account every single day, but I feel like it keeps me in check. Like I said, I think if I didn't check my account every single day, it would feel a little odd to me. I'm the type of person that wants to know exactly how much I have and wants to know exactly what I'm working with. That way I'm not struggling to make ends meet. That's the thing that I would hate, to have to, feel like I'm struggling to make ends meet. If I check my accounts every single day, I don't have that stress, so.
Yeah, a little bit of rigor, a little bit of routine, and a little bit of financial stress out the window, because you're paying attention and you're on budget. I'm assuming that you're following your, which we'll get to your plan here next. But as long as you're paying attention to those things and you can see it and you know that you're going in the right direction, I can imagine that takes a lot of stress off the shoulders. Speaking of, let's move on to your particular favorite method, as you have mentioned it, the pay yourself first.
Yes. So pay yourself first is really just that. It's paying yourself first. So rather than having your savings, debt repayment, or investments come last, you make that your priority. And so for my personal situation, I actually have my direct deposit split into 2 different accounts. So I take a decent chunk out, a few $100s of my paycheck biweekly. I purposely have that set into a different account that I have access to and I know is there. I can easily access it. That's the thing is, for me, I would hate to feel like I'm restricted in accessing that money. It took me a little while to get to that point, because I would oftentimes dip into it, and then pay it back. As long as you're paying it back, that's what matters the most, I think. But divvying up your money so that it's, how the saying goes, out of sight, out of mind, right? So you have that money set aside. I put a specific amount into my savings every month, so I don't have to feel like it's painful to do that, like it automatically is done for me. I don't have a say in it at this point unless I go and adjust something, but it's a little bit too much of a hassle for me to do. So I leave it as is. And it's been that way for a few years, and so it works for me. I think the reason why it works for me is because it essentially allows me to, work with this fixed amount, this fixed income, and I use that primarily for paying bills, and I still divvy it up even a little bit more. I have separate savings buckets as well. So I have me and my wife, we have joint accounts, and so we each put equal amounts into like bills, a bucket for bills, a bucket for if we are planning to travel sometime throughout the year. If I have a specific like hobby, if I'm into trading cards like sneakers, things like that, I have a specific amount that I don't want to go over, so that's the specific amount I put in there each month, each every 2 weeks, right? Every 2 weeks. So by the end of the month, I know exactly how much I have to spend on that, whatever that may be for you.
And then, so we've talked about on previous dollars and cents episodes about budgeting, about account structuring and direct deposit as tools that you can use to help enforce that budget exactly the way that you're using it. I do a little bit of that myself. We don't, we also, my wife and I have joint account, but everything just dumps into the main one.
Yeah.
I have a split on mine that goes into another account for paying off other items, and I have more going in there than necessary. So it slowly builds up over time as a hidden savings account. That just allows kind of that same scenario. It's just, hey, out of sight, out of mind. I don't access that one regularly at all.
Right.
But it does. It builds up over time. And every now and again, you look in there and you're like, oh, hey, what do you know? This is basically a reverse of some of the other ones, as we've been talking about. We're not focused necessarily out the gate on the expenses prior. You're focused on building up your financial future, your savings, those goals first.
Right.
Now, again, this is a starting point. You still don't want to be like, well, I want to save 90% of my paycheck, so I guess I can't afford my mortgage.
Exactly.
So again, with all things in balance of making sure that you're paying to keep yourself in a house and with your car and other items, making sure you get those covered.
Right.
But with a focus first and foremost on making sure that money is going aside to savings so that you know that you're progressing towards those goals.
Exactly. And it feels good. That's the thing for me. I think one of the main reasons why it became my favorite budgeting method is because it feels good. It feels good to see, that money sitting there and knowing that you work towards that. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's all about consistency at the end of the day. I think for me, when I started using this method, it was primarily because I wanted to save up for a car. And my wife and I, we told ourselves, like the only way we're going to save up for this is if we actively, save the money, don't touch it, don't look at it. And so, I mean, even since then, I have my car now at this point, and I still continue to do that because who knows? I may, want another car. I may be working towards the next saving step. For me, is like a home. That's what's next for us. And I think that it's a really smart way to do that. Yeah.
I had a conversation with a friend who was looking at buying a home and was trying to figure out how that mortgage payment was going to feel.
Yeah.
And my suggestion was start pulling that money aside. What you think your mortgage payment is going to be, just pull that aside and put it into a separate savings account, because then if you get through, say, a year of that and you realize, hey, I've adjusted my budget to handle what this expense is, not only have you not lost that money in any way, shape, or form, but now you've built up a down payment as well.
Yeah. Exactly. So it's funny that you say that, because that's more or less what we did. We kind of calculated, we ballparked our monthly payment for the car, and so we ballparked that amount, and that's what we split it in two, and we actively put that amount away, and so it works. It definitely works. It worked for us. It may not work for everyone, but it definitely works if you are committed and you take accountability and you're responsible with your money. So, and
again, like with all budgets, following the budget, making the budget is step one. Following the budget is step two.
Right.
The other thing that you mentioned in there that kind of brings us to our fourth category is your different the sub accounts that you talked about. Ooh, that was fun. Those sub accounts effectively are working like our last system, which is the envelope plan, also known as cash stuffing. This is literally taking like cash and putting it in envelopes and setting that aside. kind of similar to those sub accounts, except I think you've got a little bit more flexibility with the sub accounts. This particular method is the one that we implemented for my grandfather. He was going into dementia at the time, so we needed to be very more rigorous with what he had and what he was allowed to do. So his particular situation was he had this much money per day, and once that envelope was empty, he didn't have anything more that he could spend.
Right. Once it's gone, it's gone.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that process of basically saying, if there's no cash in the envelope, you can't afford to do the thing. Or if there's not enough cash in the envelope, you can't afford to do the thing.
Yeah.
But you're setting it aside. Part of this budget from a method that I was looking at was kind of the tactile aspect of it, where you're not putting things into a savings account. You're actually having that physical cash there to help show you what it is that you can work with. Now, obviously, one of your quote unquote envelopes should be your savings account. You should be putting that money away to plan for the future. But using that physical separation of money, and then of course having the self-discipline to not reach into a different envelope to cover for something else.
And that's the thing, is something like that wouldn't work for me. It's a great visual, and I'm a visual learner, but I feel like something like that wouldn't work for me just because of the fact, you're right, it's a little too tempting. It's very easy, you have all your cash envelopes together, so it's very easy. If you run out, maybe take a little bit from the next envelope over, and then alongside that, I mean, worst case scenario would be you lose the money, right? And that's obviously not going to feel very good. And so you're right, especially like when it comes to envelope system, keeping envelopes separate, keeping them in a secure spot, and then with the savings, putting it away as quickly as possible if you're able to,
And then of course, again, you don't need to do the envelope cash system with actual envelopes and actual cash.
True.
If you can be disciplined enough to do, say, sub accounts and only access those accounts for those specific things, and keeping it separated is the way that you stay disciplined, then you can do that. The basis of this was legitimate, literal envelopes and cash, and some people might need to go that far.
Yeah.
But if you do and you're willing to, and it works for you, like by all means, go do that. And that you'll not exceed if you don't even have that money in that envelope and aren't borrowing from the next one over.
Right. And that's exactly the same way my parents were. Growing up, they were very traditional in their banking. Like, they had bank accounts and they had their money set there. But when it came to their daily expenses, whether that's weekly, monthly, they had cash. They had physical cash envelopes in our house, and they would divvy it up accordingly, and pull funds from there when they needed to go to the store, buy some groceries, go get gas, things like that. And so if it works, it works. That's the thing.
Oh yeah. And again, like, different generations probably come at this differently. We being a younger generation are much more in a digital age. We're used to apps like Venmo, PayPal, doing all digital transactions, and kind of the convenience of that. And honestly, I think I'm personally might be more apt to spend money by swiping my card than I am by spending the cash that's in my wallet. But I also have a different view that, like, the cash in my wallet is free money. It's not planned. It's just there.
It's dangerous. It's a dangerous game. I'm exactly the same way, Scott. No, yes. If I have cash on me, I spend it. And so I usually tend not to carry cash. I either spend it or lose it. I either spend one of the two, right? And so I tend to not carry cash unless I know that it has a specific purpose and I'm headed straight there for it, So, yeah, definitely.
So, for people that are out there listening, there's obviously these 4 methods that we've talked about. You can find out a lot of information about these by Googling those names: 50, 30, 20, zero-based budget, pay yourself first, and the envelope methods. You can Google those. You can find information. Websites and other companies out there like NerdWallet have good descriptions of these. They also have the ability to go out there and grab a particular app to help you with this, or you can go old school, pen and paper, or slightly new school with like Excel spreadsheets, and put those pieces of information in there. There's a couple of apps that I looked up. I did mention NerdWallet. Apparently, their particular app or method that they use is the 50-30-20. Oh. So their app is designed around that one. For zero-based budgeting, there's a couple. YNAB is a budgeting app that is based 100% on zero-based budget, as well as, not shockingly by its name, Every Dollar is a budgeting app that is for zero-based budgeting. And then based off of the envelope system is an app called Good Budget. Now, I don't know if these apps in particular are pay or if they are free. You're going to have to go and look at those. But these were the ones that were top rated by NerdWallet when I was looking at their website at these particular methods. Yeah. So I would suggest for most people, if you need something that's going to give you structure and help you move these forward, take a look at those apps. If, however, you're a little bit less inclined to put all that information into an app and maybe you won't open it, maybe Excel spreadsheet or pen and paper. Mm-hmm. But again, I think like we talked about earlier, the key here is paying attention, looking at it regularly and adjusting as necessary and getting into that habit and that routine.
Right. And you will never know whether one of these apps or, whether a spreadsheet or whether pen and paper is the best, method for you until you try it. And so that's the thing with budgeting is if you don't already have a budget, at least starting a budget, seeing how it goes. If for whatever reason it's not the budget, method for you, pivoting and switching it up. Maybe you try them all and you find your favorite and continue with that one. But it's just a matter of keeping up with it.
Yeah, and again, kind of personality type when it comes to which budgeting method works for you. Similar to the app, is this actually give me the features that I'm interested in? I know with HAPO online in our online banking, you can sign up for an application or a service called MX Money, which is a money management. It allows you to load up multiple of your accounts so you can see the transactions that are happening across those. These tools like those are fantastic as a starting point to look into your cash flow. And that's a great way to start looking at and evaluating your budget, because whenever you get into a budget, you're going to have to look at your expenses and your incomes and everything else. And you're going to have to get rid of that cash avoidance and actually take a look. Yeah. And then, of course, you might have to become pretty honest with yourself about what you're doing, where you're spending your money, and maybe that's a scary first step for some people.
Yeah, that's the thing. It can feel scary, but I feel like once you get into the habit of knowing exactly what you're working with, income and expenses, you will quickly realize it's scarier not knowing. It really is. It's scarier not knowing what's going on with your money. And that's the thing is when it comes to money management, you have to be proactive about it. You cannot allow it to control you. You really have to take control of the situation and take responsibility.
Yeah, it's one of those things where when you're looking at all those, like, I would assume that it would be a lot scarier if you're living paycheck to paycheck, not knowing what you're doing with that, and then implementing something like this, taking that hard look and being able to maybe get yourself out of that situation with some planning, where now you're starting to put some savings in, where you can now have that emergency fund that you need to cover things that come up, and drag yourself out into that kind of less financial stress situation. Like you said, being able to look at it and seeing where everything is, seeing that savings grow is a good feeling. Yes. Being able to watch those things and the removal of all that financial stress. Yep. Which we did an entire episode on financial stress. It's a pretty big thing. A lot of people can get pretty worked up over that, and money is one of those things that we've all got to deal with it. But you may as well deal with it on your terms.
Exactly.
Do you have anything else for us?
Other than, just reaching out to us, I feel we have over 100, certified credit union financial counselors within HAPO. We have a few at every location, to my knowledge at least. And so if anyone out there is struggling, managing their expenses, paying off debt, anything really at the end of the day, anything personal finance related, we're here for you. And that's the thing is these appointments are very very low key. They're very, stress free. You come in and you talk with us about whatever you'd like to, discuss. And so hour-long appointments, you can set up as many of them as you'd like. They're completely free, like I mentioned. And so that's probably the biggest resource, in my opinion, that we have, the most valuable that HAPO offers, and it's available for everyone. You don't have to be a HAPO member. That's the thing. We're not here to, convert you, to switch accounts, right? We're here to help you out.
Yeah, I think that is a fantastic point, because sometimes like the starting point is the hardest thing to get past. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, okay, there's these apps, there's these things, but now I've got to actually do it. And sitting down with somebody else and having them be able to listen back and forth and maybe give you that little bit of a push to get started and come up with what is a legitimate personalized plan for you. Yes. Could be everything that you need. And like I mentioned, in that reading and research I did, probably 2 times more likely to reach your financial goals if you're actually focused on your budget and implementing these. Obviously, setting aside a particular chunk of your paycheck into savings is a great first step to meeting a financial goal that requires saving money.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly, yep. And that's the thing is, at the end of the day is, like I said, you'll never know until you try it, right? Yeah. And I feel like if more people knew about that statistic that you mentioned, the 2 times more likely to achieve your financial goals, more people knew that, I feel like they'd be a little bit more inclined to actually dive into this and commit to it. So yeah.
Perfect. All right. Well, this has been a Spare Change episode of Dollars and Cents, HAPO Community Credit Union's Financial Literacy Podcast. Until next time.